They changed history with a single bullet, a knife, a bomb. They killed presidents, archdukes, leaders who shaped the world. Their names are remembered. Their victims are immortalized. But what happened to them? How did the assassins die? Some were shot on sight. Some were executed. Some were beaten to death by mobs. Others rotted in prison. And a few simply vanished. This is how famous assassins really died. John Wilkes Booth was a famous actor. Handsome, charismatic, beloved by audiences across America. But on April 14th, 1865, he became something else, an assassin. Booth walked into Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. He climbed the stairs to the presidential box. He opened the door. President Abraham Lincoln sat watching the play. Booth raised a pistol, aimed at the back of Lincoln's head, and fired. The bullet entered Lincoln's skull. The president slumped forward. Booth leaped from the box onto the stage. He shouted, "Sic semper tyrannis," which means, "Thus always to tyrants." Then he ran. For 12 days, Booth fled through Maryland and Virginia. Federal troops hunted him relentlessly. His face was on wanted posters everywhere. A massive manhunt swept across the region. Booth's leg was broken from the jump at the theater. He could barely walk. He relied on Confederate sympathizers to hide him. On April 26, 1865, soldiers tracked him to a tobacco barn in rural Virginia. Booth was trapped inside with an accomplice named David Harold. The soldiers surrounded the barn. They demanded surrender. Harold gave up immediately. But Booth refused. He shouted that he would never be taken alive. The soldiers set the barn on fire. Flames climbed the wooden walls. Smoke filled the structure. Through a gap in the boards, Sergeant Boston Corbett saw Booth moving inside. He raised his rifle, aimed, fired. The bullet struck Booth in the neck. It severed his spinal cord. Booth collapsed. Soldiers dragged him from the burning barn. He was paralyzed from the neck down. Blood poured from the wound. For 3 hours, Booth lay dying on the porch of a nearby farmhouse. He could barely speak. He asked the soldiers to lift his hands so he could see them. They held up his limp, useless hands. He whispered his final words, "Tell my mother I died for my country." Then he looked at his hands. Useless. Paralyzed. Useless. Useless, he muttered. John Wilkes Booth died at 7 a.m. The man who killed a president died paralyzed and broken on a stranger's porch. His body was secretly buried in a warehouse to prevent it from becoming a shrine. Years later, it was returned to his family, but the glory he imagined never came. Only shame. Gavrilo Princip was 19 years old, a student, a revolutionary, a member of a Serbian nationalist group called the Black Hand. On June 28, 1914, he stood on a street corner in Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria rode past in an open car. Earlier that day, another assassin had thrown a bomb at the Archduke's car. It missed. The Archduke survived. But his driver took a wrong turn. The car stopped, right in front of Princip. It was pure chance. Princip couldn't believe his luck. He raised a pistol, fired twice. One bullet struck the Archduke in the neck. The other hit his wife, Sophie, in the abdomen. Both died within minutes. That assassination triggered World War I. Millions would die because of what Princip did that day. But Princip himself? He was arrested immediately. He tried to swallow cyanide to kill himself. But the poison was old. It only made him vomit. He tried to shoot himself. But the crowd wrestled the gun away. Because he was under 20 years old, he could not be executed under Austro-Hungarian law. Instead, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was sent to Theresienstadt Fortress in Bohemia. The conditions were brutal. His cell was cold, damp, dark. He was chained to the wall, given minimal food, no medical care. Princip's health collapsed quickly. He developed tuberculosis. The disease ravaged his lungs. Then skeletal tuberculosis set in. His bones began to rot from the inside. His right arm became infected. The infection spread. Doctors amputated his arm without anesthesia. Princip screamed through the procedure, but the infection didn't stop. His body wasted away. He weighed less than 90 pounds. His skin turned gray. His teeth fell out. He could barely move. On April 28, 1918, Gavrilo Princip died in his cell. He was 23 years old. World War I was still raging. Over 17 million people had died. The man who started World War I died alone, armless, and rotting in a prison cell. He never saw the world he destroyed. Harvey Oswald was a former Marine, a loner, a drifter. He had defected to the Soviet Union, then returned to America. He was angry, unstable. On November 22, 1963, he brought a rifle to work. He worked at the Texas School Book Depository in Dallas. President John F. Kennedy's motorcade was passing below. Oswald positioned himself at a sixth-floor window. He aimed. He fired 3 shots. 1 missed. 1 struck Kennedy in the back. The 3rd hit him in the head. President Kennedy died minutes later. Oswald fled the building. He was arrested hours later at a movie theater after shooting a police officer. For 2 days, Oswald was interrogated. He denied everything. "I'm just a patsy," he said. He claimed he was being framed. On November 24th, police prepared to transfer Oswald to the county jail. Reporters and cameras filled the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. The transfer was broadcast live on national television. Oswald was led through the crowd in handcuffs. Suddenly, a man stepped forward from the crowd. Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner. He raised a revolver. Millions of Americans watched live as Ruby fired a single shot into Oswald's abdomen. Oswald gasped. His face twisted in pain. He collapsed. "Jack, you son of a bitch!" someone shouted. Oswald was rushed to Parkland Hospital, the same hospital where Kennedy had died 2 days earlier, the same trauma room, the same doctors. They operated for hours, but the bullet had torn through vital organs. His liver was destroyed. His aorta was severed. Blood filled his abdomen. Harvey Oswald died at 1:07 p.m. on November 24, 1963. He was 24 years old. The man who killed a president was killed on live television before he could ever stand trial. To this day, conspiracy theories swirl. Was Oswald the lone gunman? Was he silenced? No one knows for certain. But one thing is clear. He died before the world could hear his side of the story. Charlotte Corday was 24 years old, a minor noblewoman, educated, determined. It was 1793. The French Revolution had turned into the Reign of Terror. Thousands were being executed. Jean-Paul Marat was one of the revolution's most radical leaders. He called for mass executions, published lists of enemies to be killed. Corday believed he was a monster. She decided to stop him. On July 13, 1793, Corday traveled to Paris. She bought a kitchen knife. She went to Marat's home. Marat suffered from a painful skin condition. He spent most of his time in a medicinal bath. Corday convinced his servants she had important information. She was allowed into his bathroom. Marat sat in the tub, writing. Corday approached. She pulled the knife from her dress and plunged it into Marat's chest. The blade pierced his lung and aorta. Blood poured into the bathwater. Marat screamed once, then died. Corday made no attempt to escape. She stood calmly. She was arrested immediately. 4 days later, she was tried and sentenced to death. On July 17, 1793, Charlotte Corday was taken to the guillotine. Thousands gathered to watch. She walked calmly to the scaffold. She wore a red shirt, the color reserved for those who killed. She refused a blindfold. She wanted to see the blade. The executioner positioned her neck beneath the blade. The blade fell. Her head dropped into the basket, but the horror didn't end there. The executioner's assistant picked up her severed head. He slapped it across the face. Witnesses claimed her expression changed. Her cheeks flushed red. Whether from residual nerve activity or something else, no one knows. Charlotte Corday died believing she had saved France. Instead, her act only intensified the terror. Marat became a martyr. More people were executed in his name. She had changed nothing, except her own fate. Ramón Mercader was a Spanish communist, a Soviet agent. In 1940, Joseph Stalin gave him a mission: kill Leon Trotsky. Trotsky was Stalin's greatest enemy, a revolutionary leader in exile, living in Mexico City. Mercader spent months infiltrating Trotsky's inner circle. He used a false identity, called himself Jacques Mornard. He befriended Trotsky's guards, gained access to his home. He even started a relationship with one of Trotsky's secretaries. On August 20th, 1940, Mercader entered Trotsky's study. He carried an ice axe hidden under his coat. Trotsky sat at his desk, reading. Mercader raised the ice axe and brought it down on Trotsky's skull. The pick pierced Trotsky's head. Trotsky screamed. He fought back. Despite the wound, he wrestled Mercader to the ground. He bit Mercader's hand. Guards rushed in and beat Mercader nearly to death. Trotsky was rushed to the hospital. He died the next day. Mercader was arrested. He was sentenced to 20 years in a Mexican prison. He never revealed his true identity, never admitted who sent him. He endured torture, interrogation. He said nothing. He served his full sentence. In 1960, he was released. He moved to the Soviet Union. Stalin was dead by then, but the KGB welcomed Mercader as a hero. He was given a pension, a quiet apartment, a medal in secret, the Order of Lenin. But he was never truly free. He lived in fear, paranoid, isolated. He knew too much. He had killed for Stalin. And Stalin's successors didn't trust him. He moved to Cuba in the 1970s. On October 18, 1978, Ramón Mercader died of cancer in Havana. He was 64 years old. The man who killed Trotsky died in exile, haunted by the murder that defined his life. He was buried in Moscow under his real name, finally acknowledged, but forgotten by history. Nathuram Godse was a Hindu nationalist, a journalist, a true believer. He believed Mahatma Gandhi was betraying India. Gandhi had advocated for peace with Muslims, for partition, for compromise. Godse saw this as weakness. On January 30th, 1948, Godse attended Gandhi's evening prayer meeting in New Delhi. Gandhi walked through the garden, greeting followers. Godse approached. He bowed. Then he raised a pistol, a Beretta semi-automatic. He fired 3 times. All 3 bullets struck Gandhi in the chest. Gandhi collapsed. His last words were, "Hey Ram," which means, "Oh God." Godse made no attempt to flee. He stood calmly as the crowd swarmed him. He was arrested immediately. His trial lasted months. Godse showed no remorse. He gave a lengthy speech defending his actions. He argued that Gandhi had weakened India, that his death was necessary. He was sentenced to death. On November 15, 1949, Nathuram Godse was led to the gallows in Ambala jail. He walked calmly. He refused a blindfold. He chanted Akhand Bharat, which means undivided India. The noose was placed around his neck. The trapdoor opened. Godse dropped. His neck snapped. He died instantly. The man who killed Gandhi died believing he was a patriot. To this day, some in India still see him as a hero. Others see him as a monster. But one thing is certain. He killed the man who freed India, and he paid with his life. Yigal Amir was a law student, a religious extremist. He believed Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin was a traitor. Rabin had signed peace agreements with the Palestinians, the Oslo Accords. Amir saw this as betrayal. He believed Jewish law permitted killing a traitor. On November 4th, 1995, Rabin attended a peace rally in Tel Aviv. Thousands gathered in support of peace. Amir waited near Rabin's car. As Rabin walked toward the vehicle, Amir stepped forward. He fired 3 shots. 2 bullets struck Rabin in the back. 1 bullet hit a bodyguard. Rabin collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital. He died on the operating table. Amir was arrested at the scene. He smiled. He showed no regret. At his trial, Amir said he acted to save Israel. He quoted religious texts. He claimed divine justification. He was sentenced to life in prison. Unlike the others, Yigal Amir is still alive. He sits in an Israeli prison. He has never expressed remorse. He married in prison, fathered a child through smuggled sperm. He believes he is a hero. He gives interviews, writes letters, maintains his innocence of wrongdoing. The man who killed Rabin lives on, unrepentant, behind bars. He destroyed the peace process, changed the course of Israeli history, and he will die in prison, forgotten by most, revered by a few, but never free. They pulled triggers, plunged knives, swung axes. They killed leaders, changed history, sparked wars. But history did not forgive them. Some were shot, some were hanged, some rotted in cells, some were beaten by mobs, and one still sits in prison, waiting. They believed they were heroes. Freedom fighters, patriots, but they died as murderers, hated, forgotten, or worse, remembered only for the blood on their hands. This is how famous assassins really died. This is the truth.